right. Hello, students. Thank you so much for joining today's Pre-Health Thursday. The topic is Movement to Medicine, Pathways in Kinesiology and Clinical Physiology with the University of Central Florida's Kinesiology program. We have two awesome presenters today, Dr. Freddie and Dr. Fukuda. And before we start, I will drop the QR code and the link for you guys to all check in for today's session. Please do so. That way you can receive confirmation that you attended. And if you have any questions throughout the chat, feel free to drop them and I will get to them if you need any support. But there will be a Q&A at the end, so please wait and be patient. But without further ado, I will let them go ahead and present. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, McKenna. Thank you all for joining us during lunchtime. Uh, Very excited to talk to you guys a little bit about the different career paths related to kinesiology. Um, so I have myself and Dr. Freddie, and we decided and we found out when we go to our own career classes that it kind of helps students when they hear some of our own backgrounds. So we're going to spend a little bit of time, each of us, for talking about how we ended up where we are. So I've been at UCF for 13 years. And I'm currently the division chair, and I have experience as the graduate program coordinator and undergraduate program coordinator. Um, let's see. We had the slides working a second ago, and now they're not. Okay, there we go. All right. So just to give a little bit of background, I actually grew up in a pretty small town in rural Idaho, about an hour outside of Boise. And I grew up doing all kinds of sports because I was lucky to do that in a small town where I could play just across the different seasons. But I spent a lot of time growing up doing judo and wrestling. And it's one of those, I wasn't very fast or strong. So those sort of sports sort of I gravitated towards. And my family had a dojo there. So when I finished high school, I had a lot of opportunities to go to different universities, but I decided I want to try to um, train and try to go to the Olympics. So I ended up going to Japan for a year studying. I did actually study there, not just judo, but other things, language and those sorts of things. So I spent a year there, came back, did some prerequisites at a community college, and ended up back at Boise State University, where I actually got a business degree. So for students looking about career paths, I'm going to show you sort of, I don't know if it's the good or the bad way, but it's not a straight path to how I ended up where I am today. But I got a degree in operations management, which is kind of like supply chain management for those of you with sort of a business background, and a minor in Japanese studies, while I was still trying to train for judo. Throughout my career, I didn't actually end up going to the Olympics. My little brother was an alternate a couple of times, but I was injured quite a bit, and I spent a lot of time in physical therapy. So when I finished my degree, my business degree, I started a job as a capacity analyst, and I spent some time in a cubicle doing long-term forecasting and that sort of thing. And I just decided I rarely get bored in my life, but I was sitting there getting all my work done for the first couple hours of the day. And I would start spending time like doing new things, changing graphs, dealing with engineers, changing things up. And they didn't like that. They didn't like that I was changing graphs and changing the processes because they just wanted the information they wanted it. So I'd spend more and more of my day sort of extended lunch hours reading books and things. So I decided at some point I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I went back and I did the prerequisites for physical therapy school. So I actually got into the physical therapy program at the University of Oklahoma. So I moved there, and I did a semester of PT school and decided I didn't want to be a physical therapist either. So I spent most of my, uh, younger life trying to figure out the things I didn't want to do. So after a semester of PT school, I actually met Jeff Stout, who's actually the school director here at University of Central Florida, but he was at OU at the time, and he was like, PT's boring. You're just gonna, you're gonna do the same thing, the same knee problems or whatever over time. But if you start doing research related to exercise science and exercise physiology, then you can start to inform the practice that physical therapists do. So he kind of sold me on that. I ended up getting my master's in exercise physiology and went on to get my PhD in exercise physiology from the University of Oklahoma, um, mostly in the things that I still do, actually. So performance assessment, body composition, dietary supplements. So my first job out of after getting my PhD was in Omaha, Nebraska at Creighton University, uh, liberal arts Jesuit university. And then during that time, Dr. Stout actually went to University of Central Florida, and after a year in Omaha, one really long winter, I decided that maybe I should come to Florida. So I getting hired here at UCF. Mostly the big pull for me here was obviously uh, a large university. They had graduate programs, master's and PhD. So I came and sort of worked my way up the ranks, and it's been 13 years. Sorry, Sarah, if you can move that. I don't Actually, maybe it's working now. I just wanted to share this. This is called the capability statement. So it's something we put together to actually try to solicit funding for our research projects. So you'll typically hear about NIH or DoD or those sorts of situations where faculty will go out and try to ask for money to do research. So this capability statement is actually set up to work with industry partners. So a lot of the research I've done has actually been funded by dietary supplement companies. You can see in the bottom corner there, some of the people we've worked with, Abbott Nutrition, so they do Pedialyte, Ensure, some of those products. And then probably the one that most younger people will see is Celsius there. So the energy drink was one of the early on companies to actually fund research. And I think it's been part of their longevity of why they've been able to stick around when a lot of other products haven't, is because they spent some time with their development. And they have data supporting sort of their claims that are on their cans and their advertisements. So you can see a lot of this is basically set up trying to say what we do. So you see at the top there, sort of this tagline: we help sport and health or wellness brands validate product impact using human performance data. So we're looking for partners to basically sort of work on these types of things. So that'll span dietary supplements, which we've done a lot of in the past, but also health tech, military and tactical organizations, to try to go through and see if they can validate training programs, any sort of wearable devices, those kinds of things. So just to get a little bit of idea of some of the work that we're doing. And I'll just play a short video here, recently produced by our college, showing dissertation projects sort of ongoing that'll give you sort of the wide span of what you can do with a kinesiology degree. I don't know if there's sound there. Guess if it's not working, I can just go through and talk through. So this is Modesto LeBron. He's a PhD student. This is actually his dissertation that he's working on finishing up right now. And he's trying to combine physical and cognitive performance in a single test. Um, a lot of it actually comes from my own and his interests in combat sports. So trying to figure out, you can perform, but how can you perform when you're under duress? So if you're fatigued, if you're dehydrated. So we wanted to use this jammer arm press to basically mimic upper body power movement. So this is mimicking a punch. And then we had people go through and they sit in a sauna. So they'll lose 2 to 3% of their body mass, and then we'll try to have them go through the same test where they're producing power, but they don't know which direction they're doing it in. So there's a series of tests that will have some lights, and once you get the correct indicators, it'll basically tell you to make that decision and move as quickly as possible. So you can see the lights set up there. And we're just trying to figure out if we can come up with lab tests that can mimic these sort of real life situations. We can share this video with Mo describes it a little bit better than I do probably here. So you guys can look at his video. So that's sort of a little bit of my background, and it sort of helps here. We have this set up where I'm talking a little bit more on the human performance side, strength and conditioning side, where Dr. Freddie's going to go through and talk more on the exercise physiology side. And we'll talk a little bit about our different tracks at the undergrad level towards the end of the presentation. So a lot of different definitions out there for kinesiology. Is sort of a term that most academic programs have tried to embrace, sort of showing the whole breadth of what our students potentially study. So it's the study of how the body moves. Okay, so in order to do that, you need to know a lot of these things in the background: anatomy, physiology, but it's usually an applied version of physiology. So we're getting out of just cells, and getting to how the body functions. So it ends up being how we take in energy and how we use it to make our bodies move. And related to that is, the physics application of all these things, so the biomechanics piece of it. And then sort of a lot of my background that you sort of seen already with the video and some of the things that I've talked about specifically related to assessments and evaluation. So breaking down a little bit further, probably talked through most of these. Biomechanics, exercise physiology are the pieces that are probably the most prominent, but motor control. So there's this lifespan development piece to it all, or just learning. So coaching is a piece of it, teaching is a piece of it as well. Sports psychology isn't as large of a part of our own program here at UCF, but there is a big behavior change component of it that's really important, right? So you could have the best training programs in the world, the best equipment, the best coaches, all these things. But if you can't convince a person to do the exercise, then it tends to be it's not effective. So you'll see on Instagram or anywhere else, so like this is the best way to do this, right? But if you can't convince somebody to actually do it on a regular basis, then it really doesn't really matter if it's the best version of it. So, we go through all these different things and we do our own research on this. But if it's not something that somebody's going to regularly utilize, then it tends to be not very helpful. So our students end up going out and helping people basically connect the latest science with their lifestyles and how we can help them improve their lives. So the big piece of it for us is actually we come from physical education and that sort of background that people tend to get in school, but not as much as they used to. But trying to extend that beyond school age, um, that school age period of life. So whether people are in college or if they're working adults or getting that aging piece of it with the growing aging population, it becomes even more important to try to figure out ways to be able to connect this information with people so that they can go about their lives and live full, sort of happy lives. So a specific career path, you can see a bunch of them here. We're going to go into a little bit more detail about exercise physiology and strength and conditioning and some of the background here. But a lot of our undergrads can go directly into these career paths that are sort of highlighted here, or with a little bit more schooling and other professional programs, they can pursue a variety of different options. Obviously, physical therapy is a big popular piece with our undergrad students, but PAs, chiropractors, dietetics, university professors like myself and Dr. Freddie are another option. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about strength and conditioning. So the big piece that probably most goes to most people is maybe about personal training. So that's that one component of it. But there's a whole other, the basis of a lot of this is actually related to collegiate and professional athletics. So strength and conditioning coaches that end up working with these athletes to either get them to the next level or can sort of sustain their careers once they get to that next level. So, the ones that people tend to think about the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, something along those lines, or any collegiate athletics. But some more interesting ones that are more local are like WWE, the NXT. Right. So these like pro wrestling pieces, you never think about like this is their careers. And if they get injured, then it makes their career shorter. And then the company spends less time or spends a lot of money to sort of keep them healthy so that they can basically provide this entertainment for people. So I think that's sort of an interesting one. And, a cross product of that is just the idea of corporate wellness in general. The idea of insurance and how much it costs to provide insurance to employees and people with a strength conditioning or personal training background can sort of help keep people healthy so that they're lower insurance costs. So specifically, our program is actually accredited through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. And so they have a number of different certification pathways that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. The National Strength and Conditioning Association actually stands out quite a bit from other organizations because they have their own foundation that funds quite a bit of research in this area. So a bunch of our students on a regular basis get scholarships from them. And we also have faculty and student projects that have been funded by research grants through the organization. And because they have a pretty strong tradition of certifying strength and conditioning and exercise professionals, there's a large group of people to sort of help each other out. Put internship placements and those sorts of things are a big piece of it, or just mentorship opportunities throughout this community. So just to maybe connect a few dots, but it's like, why is this person talking about um, sports at this level? Strength and conditioning is probably the easiest one to think about, but there's a bunch of crossovers. So sports science is a big piece of it. Decision making for athletes and for coaches is a big one. Pulling in data and helping interpret that. And a lot of times the people will go to someone with an economics degree, right? And they'll be the one that will process all this big data. But we still need somebody to be able to interpret it and get it back to coaching and this sort of interdisciplinary team that are making decisions about athletes related to performance. And then you can see sort of in the background of this, physical therapy obviously is another piece of it, athletic training, and then coaching in general. Sort of mentioned this earlier, and some of that video was related to this, but obviously tactical athletes is a big piece of this. So all of our um, service personnel, first responders, trying to make sure that they're prepared for the things that they're going to face. It's sort of an interesting group because with athletes, when a competition is, right? So you can plan these things out. But with tactical athletes, you don't know when they're going to need to be able to perform and respond. So it's a different set of considerations, and that's something that we try to have our students be prepared to work with this group. So we actually have a tactical strength and conditioning class at the undergrad level, and there's a certification that we'll talk about in a couple of slides. There's also government-funded sort of programs to be able to connect recent grads with these types of organizations that are preparing these tactical athletes. Sort of bounce around a little bit, but I really like this paper that was published actually by Matt Stock. So he's a exercise physiologist, but works in our DPT program here at University of Central Florida. And he's the director of our Institute of Exercise Physiology and Rehabilitation Sciences, which has a great conference here every year. So I can keep talking forever about these things. But he did a survey with a number of physical therapists and physical therapy students, and they wanted to know how much they use strength training in their practice, and then how confident they feel about this prescription process. So great results here of 90% of therapists and students say that they prescribe strength training, which is something that's really important to us, that we understand that if people are stronger, they're less likely to get re-injured or have new injuries, right? So that's great on that side of things. The unfortunate part of it was that only 48% of the therapists felt that they had enough education in this area, and only 24% of students. Okay, and roughly a third of them felt that strength training was applied, in an effective manner in their discipline. So the big takeaway for us was, if you're going to want to be a physical therapist, you should come be a kinesiology undergrad so you can learn strength and conditioning so you feel more confident, so you can help your clients in the future. So I sort of already mentioned some of these things off the right, and we're going to have another slide talking about that. Okay, so the National Strength and Conditioning Association has a number of certifications that are available. Our program at the undergrad level is specifically designed to prepare students for the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist. So we have built-in internships that are required to be under the supervision of somebody with the CSCS certification. So that's sort of the industry standard. There's a requirement that you have under undergrad degree versus a lot of the personal training certifications don't have that requirement. So that's sort of the gold standard. There are advanced or supporting certifications. You can see there's a sports scientist certification that you need some experience with. So that'd be like post graduation. And then this tactical strength and conditioning facilitator. So specifically trying to prepare people to work with military populations and some of our other first responders. You can see just a couple of job postings there. Usually this ends up being some sort of subcontractor with the military to sort of support some of these things, specifically for the TSAT. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Freddie, and she's going to talk a little bit more about our exercise physiology side of things.
All right, thank you, Dr. Fukuda. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So as Dr. Fukuda said, my name is Sarah Freddie. I'm a clinical assistant professor here in the kinesiology department. I'm also a co-director of our research lab, the CARE lab, and Dr. Fukuda will kind of talk a little bit about that our research labs before we close out here. And then I also coordinate our master's track in clinical exercise physiology. So that's kind of my background. And like Dr. Kuda mentioned, we think it's helpful to explain our background to see, the turns that you can take and the experiences. And, at any point we could have stopped and, stayed at that level. And just to show you a more real world examples of the type of clients that we're working with and the type of actual duties that we're participating in. So before I get started, I do want to say that Dr. Kuda was being fairly modest, regardless of the Olympics. He is a 4th-degree black belt in judo. So I want to call that out first. Okay, so I'm originally from South Georgia. That's where I got my undergraduate degree in exercise physiology. So I am, an exercise physiologist, tried and true. I then sat for my clinical exercise physiologist exam and worked in cardiac rehab for about a year. After that, I went to Florida State University for my master's in exercise science. And while I was there, I participated in some research, but also worked as a graduate assistant in starting up an exercise program in collaboration with Tallahassee Memorial and specifically through the Metabolic Health Center. So we worked with individuals who are obese, who are trying to lose weight in order to qualify for weight loss surgery. And so we had them on very low calorie diets and as well as creating specialized exercise programs for them. And so I did that while I was in Tallahassee and then moved back to Georgia and actually started teaching with my master's at Valdosta State where I received my bachelor's. So I had a dual appointment there. So I was teaching classes, but I also was the director of our special populations clinic. And so that's kind of why I was brought back to South Georgia, is to start this clinic to serve the South Georgia population that needed supervised exercise training. So we started the Center for Exercise Medicine and Rehabilitation. And it was a collaboration between exercise science or kinesiology and athletic training. So I ran the fitness and wellness center, and then right next door was the athletic training clinic. And that's just one example of how we really like to collaborate with other health professions. And, we wanted to make sure that we set that gold standard of if I'm working with someone who is post-stroke and there are specific rehabilitation techniques or modalities or exercises that they need that is slightly out of my scope, I can just send them right next door and they can get that, that care as well. So in the middle of your screen, you can kind of see some of my clients that I shared with their permission, of course. We had anyone from young adults with special considerations, sensory, intellectual, motor impairments, to older adults, just to help with the natural aging process. But really anyone who didn't feel safe going to a gym by themselves, or their physician said, you need to be supervised while you are exercising. While I was there, I started my PhD program. So I actually got my PhD from a partially hybrid program in Rocky Mountain University in Utah. And so for the first couple of years, I took my PhD classes and collected data within the clinic. And then my last 2 years, I moved out to Utah to complete my dissertation. And so that involved kind of building on what I was doing at the clinic and looking at cardiovascular and pulmonary function abilities in older adults. But I also did, a couple other projects with looking at those same physiological functions in electronic cigarette users, as well as just the average healthy adult and different submaximal testing that would be appropriate for, all individuals. So after I finished my PhD, I did teach at a small Catholic university in the Chicagoland area. As I graduated with my PhD in 2020, and there was very few prospects at that time. But luckily, a job posting became available here at UCF. And not until I read that job posting did I really feel like I kind of found like my footing of where I really was meant to be. And I read the job posting for this clinical assistant professor job, and it essentially was my resume. Like I even told my now husband, this is me. If I don't get this job, then I don't know what I've done in my life. So luckily I did get that job. And it was a combination of basically everything I have done in the past, and really utilizing my expertise, and how to pass that knowledge on to students. So I could have stopped, like I mentioned, at any of those points and would have been perfectly happy. We like to say sometimes that you have to have a sort of type of personality to get your PhD, because you just continue in school and then you end up teaching in school. So you kind of never leave college. So given my background, I want to tell you a little bit about exercise physiology specifically, and then I will also go into clinical exercise physiology. So Dr. Fukuda mentioned kinesiology in general and how that kind of branches out to different career paths. And the exercise physiologist is one. And it is, even though it's still kind of an umbrella term, it is a unique career and has its own certification, and is a specific job, exercise physiologist, like sports scientist, or strength and conditioning professional. So the exercise physiologist does work with a wide range of individuals. However, they primarily work with healthy adults, and then those with maybe special considerations or risk factors for certain controlled diseases. However, they typically don't work with more of that clinical population, or necessarily like high performance athletes. So everyone kind of in between, that's their specialty. And exercise physiologists conduct different health and fitness assessments, create exercise programs, but also do evaluate, different health behaviors and risk factors. And like Dr. Fukuda said, behavior change is a big part of that. So we do teach our students how to communicate with clients effectively and how to motivate them so that they adhere to exercise over time, because, they may only be with you for 3 hours a week. So what's going to happen, the rest of the hours is going to be, equally as important. So for the exercise physiologist exam itself, our students can sit for the certified exercise physiologist. You do have to have a bachelor's degree or higher in exercise science or equivalent. Right now, you can still sit for that without that degree. You still have to have a bachelor's degree. But in 2027, you have to graduate from an accredited program. And so we're going through that process now. We've already submitted our self-study, and we're just waiting for our site visit. And then students sit for that exam in their last semester of our undergrad kinesiology program. And then in addition, you do have to be CPR, AED, and first aid certified in order to sit for that exam. Again, that's part of, setting the standard of health professionals who are able to work with a variety of populations. So where can you work and how much you're going to get paid as an exercise physiologist? One of the nice things about our job outlook and our career is it's growing faster than other health professions. So even though we are a smaller number within that allied health professionals, the growth of exercise physiologists is higher than some of those other healthcare professions and allied health. And so you can see here the growth projected through 2034. on this slide, you can see kind of an annual salary. These are median annual wages, so it kind of depends on obviously the location that you're working in. Exercise physiologists that work for in hospitals, they usually make a little bit more money than those working like in the government. But it does kind of depend on the locations. However, you can see kind of the range of salary. And then this is throughout the United States, the median of about 58,000. So I kind of mentioned this already of the certified exercise physiologist. However, there are other certifications that our students can sit for and that we recommend depending on, their interest. So there is a certified personal trainer that you can sit for without a bachelor's degree. There's also a group exercise instructor. I sometimes will recommend the group exercise instructor to students who are going to like PT or OT because they often will work in a group setting. And there's a little bit more of that type of education within that certification. And then there's also an exercises medicine credential. And so that's in addition to any of these certifications. And that's like a set of modules that you go through and take. And it's just an added credential on that is shows really the importance of kind of like what McKenna explained at the beginning, the connection of exercise to healthcare as medicine. And so we really push that, especially in our with our clinical students. So here are just some examples of where exercise physiologists work. So you will see with exercise physiologists and with strength and conditioning professionals, Dr. Fukuda mentioned that sometimes, they're on like contract. And so at least 50% of our students end up being self-employed. So we actually have a professional practices course in our undergrad and graduate program because of that. So we really try to set students up to feel confident that they can, start their own business. Not everyone has a undergrad in business like Dr. Fukuda, and students come through and they've never learned about, assets and financial plans. And so we really try to at least give them a little bit of that information. You will see exercise physiologists a lot in community centers like YMCA or health departments, senior centers. So like either it's a senior fitness center or it could be like a skilled nursing. Of course, just like general fitness and health clubs. Dr. Fukuda also mentioned corporate wellness and fitness. There's a little bit more money in corporate wellness because they have the money, right? So think like Google or Coca-Cola or Home Depot, right? So all of those corporations have a huge number of employees and they have to pay for insurance for all of those employees. And what lowers their insurance rates is that their employees stay healthy. And so in order to make sure their employees stay healthy, they send them to exercise physiologists and obviously other medical professionals to make sure that they're assessing their health risks and that they're participating in physical activity and exercising and all of those things. So a lot of these companies then partner, or these corporations partner with companies like Exos, as an example, that is a fitness center, and they specifically partner with corporations. So you may be going to an Exos gym, but that's because you are an employee of Home Depot, for instance. And so that's a really big area that exercise physiologists are in because it combines so much of the exercise plus assessment of health risk and can be really interesting because you see all different types of people. Dr. Fukuda mentioned a little bit of the research-based clinics, and we'll touch on that as well. Health promotion and public health, of course, rehabilitation centers as well. As I mentioned, when in Georgia, how we had our fitness and wellness center and our rehabilitation center, we also like to push for rehabilitation centers like PT or OT to employ exercise physiologists to help with that handoff. A lot of times we miss that kind of period between rehab and whole body strengthening and lifetime fitness. And kind of to bridge that gap is to put, us in the same place. So clinical exercise physiology is a subset of exercise physiology. This video is a little bit long, so I won't play it, but we'll link it with McKenna. And it kind of just explains what is a clinical exercise physiologist. And so really clinical exercise physiology builds on that base knowledge that exercise physiologists have, but they take that and they use that for assessment and exercise programming for individuals with chronic disease. And so on the screen here, you can see the different conditions that clinical exercise physiologists primarily work with. So a large majority is cardiovascular and obesity or metabolic. So think individuals who have had heart attacks, strokes, as well as type 2 diabetes, and then just the multimorbidity of obesity that comes along with that, with high blood pressure, poor cholesterol, things like that. And so this is where we really specialize, is with these type of individuals and how to manipulate the exercise program for these more like complex populations, because there are a lot of special considerations and risks that come along with exercise with, chronic disease. This is an infographic that the Clinical Exercise Physiology Association created a couple years ago. And we have this up in our lab as well. These are the competencies of a clinical exercise physiologist. So you can see here, like review medical history, assess vital signs and electrocardiograms, communicate with physicians and document encounters. That's one of the things that is unique to clinical exercise physiology, is that we primarily work in medical centers. So whether it be hospital-based fitness or outpatient-based fitness, we communicate with healthcare providers a lot more because we're working with, more of a vulnerable population. And so understanding things like electronic medical records and how to document exercise, but also, adverse events, all of that plays into this occupation. Of course, identifying and responding to signs and symptoms. So there's a much higher likelihood that your client is going to experience something like chest pain or even some type of injury because of risk of falls than if you're working with a healthy individual. So again, there's a lot more that kind of goes along with the safety during exercise with this type of population. So the annual salary is fairly similar to exercise physiology. One unique thing about clinical exercise physiology is the data show that the longer you're employed, the higher your salary. So there's a good annual kind of wage increase the longer your experience is. And you can see this is from the latest salary survey. So every couple years, they send out a survey to all clinical exercise physiologists and ask, like, where are you employed? What type of individuals do you work with? What is your salary? What is your degree? All of those things. And then those are published. And so this is data from that. The top, you can see the trend in annual salary with years of experience and the difference in men and women, unfortunately. And then at the bottom, you can see, again, median annual salary. And that's comparing masters to bachelors. Now, same as I mentioned with exercise physiology, by 2027, you will have to graduate from an accredited program. And for the clinical exercise physiologist, for the most part, you will have to have a master's degree. That is, again, just because of the level of information that you have to take in. The certification exam includes everything that's covered as an exercise physiologist, plus the clinical populations. So there is a factor where you could only have a bachelor's degree, but you have to have so many clinical hours that really is just set to like kind of grandfather people in who have been working in something like cardiac rehab for, a number of years now. So where do clinical exercise physiologists work? Like I mentioned, we primarily work in healthcare settings. So again, medically supervised exercise and health education. One of the largest things is cardiac rehab, but also things like I mentioned our metabolic health center, in working with neurologic conditions like stroke, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, as well as pulmonary rehab. And then similar to the exercise physiologist, you can also work in things like community fitness centers and corporate wellness, because your expertise can be used there. I like to tell students, rarely are you going to have a client who is over the age of 40 that doesn't have at least one risk factor, right? And so you need to know, how to work around that and how to prescribe, safe and effective exercise for those individuals. So now that we kind of introduced those different professions, we want to talk about our master's program and how we have that set up, and how we train our students to be, either strength conditioning professionals, exercise physiologists, or, clinical EPs. So Dr. Fukuda is going to take over to talk about our program, and then I will kind of finish up and we'll take some questions at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Freddie. So just a little bit about our program and our faculty. So you can see, this isn't just a phrase here, but we have faculty that are here all the time. They really enjoy their jobs. They enjoy working with students. Mentorship is sort of a consistent theme throughout all of our faculty. We understand that's the reason why we're here, and we are sort of committed to educating the next generation of exercise professionals. Luckily, we're able to do that with colleagues who have great expertise. We're going to go through some of the research labs in a second and some of the things that they focus on. But there are great resources here at UCF, because we're in the Orlando metro area and in Florida. There's lots of opportunities for partnerships. Dr. Freddie had mentioned some of the corporate wellness options. One great example recently, I don't know if people are familiar with KPMG, sort of big accounting firm that has a training center down in Lake Nona. Specifically, they have their employees from across the country come here to learn about their job and their work that they do. Not related to what we do necessarily, but there is a fitness center it's called the Lake House. So fancy place, basically like a big apartment hotel sort of complex where they bring these people, and there's a fitness center there. So we actually have students who go there, an intern, and the person that runs that internship and works in that facility is a UCF grad. So he doesn't actually work for KPMG, he works for Optum, and Optum is the contractor that brings in people that manages that space. So nice partnership for us to be able to have an alum working there, but then also having interns that go and get that sort of exposure in sort of a unique situation. Similar situations actually with Disney and some other places where they have contractors that work with exercise professionals. So I mentioned earlier that kinesiology is sort of this broad and all-encompassing term for all those disciplines, with exercise physiology being one underneath it. But I just wanted to maybe bring your attention to the timeline here just to see where it sort of come from. So the UCF program actually started in 1967 as physical education and sort of adapted over time to sport and fitness in the early 2000s, to sport and exercise science in the 2010s, and then kinesiology with the most recent iteration. And each step along the way, there's been sort of this revamping of sort of the ideals and the things that are pushed or taught to the students. And in particular, it's become a more and more sort of STEM-focused, science-based discipline over time. And so you can see here at the undergrad level, we do have two tracks: exercise and sport physiology and strength and conditioning. And each of those are aligned with those sets of certifications that we mentioned in the earlier slides. And there's sort of a translational piece here from the bachelor's to the master's, so human performance and clinical exercise physiology. Students cross over in between these as well, so I don't know if it always makes sense to go from strength and conditioning to human performance necessarily, but maybe that's an opportunity to sort of cross over as you go from the bachelor's to the master's if you were to stay in that program. More recently, especially with clinical exercise physiology, we were at a grad fair fairly recently, and some nursing students came by and didn't even realize that that's an option. Sort of like tack on to having that nursing education at the undergrad level with a more of a clinical exercise physiology bent for medically supervised exercise and that sort of situation. And then we also have a PhD in kinesiology specifically. So we have, there's roughly 40 to 50 students in the master's program, and currently we have around 20 PhD students. So a nice sort of funneling of students from the undergrad level, and they can continue sort of within our ecosystem and continue to learn and get a deeper involvement and understanding of our disciplines. So real quick, maybe a little make you a little sick looking at that time lapse. We can see through some of our facilities, which has actually been upgraded and changed over time. But our faculty and our PhD students and a lot of our master's students end up not just teaching about this stuff, but they conduct research related to it as well. So you could see across the top, actually, the Ready Lab actually has a faculty member from athletic training who works with our master's and PhD students as well as athletic training students. The CNS lab, which stands for cognition, neuroplasticity, and sarcopenia, has physical therapy and kinesiology faculty in it. One of which also has an athletic training background. Our strong lab specifically actually works a lot with blood flow restriction more recently, but a broad sort of strength-based interventions for a variety of populations, including those with multiple sclerosis. Our teaching lab is a great space that our students use, and we also use for research. The RAMP lab is a physical therapy faculty that manages that space, specifically thinking about pain as it relates to exercise and clinical interventions. The care lab, which Dr. Freddy already mentioned, but combines her expertise with Dr. Chiruka's expertise in sleep, and actually more recently with yoga interventions. The Power Lab is my lab that I co-direct with Dr. Stout. You guys kind of saw some of the things that we work on. We also have a lab-based or a wet lab-based space over in biology, so we can take biological samples like blood, typically blood, but some other biological samples, and we can do deeper analyses over there. And then the EPIC lab, which is sort of tied with different exercise interventions for getting these biological samples. So big list here, but our research faculty and research expertise sort of span a variety of different areas. I probably touched on them. Anything that's on this list isn't just something that we're interested in because we watch it on TV. It's because we're actually doing research in these areas. What's really great about this list, I won't go through and read them all, is that our faculty, there's not a lot of us, but there are 10 or 11 of us, but most of us are working with PhD or master's students, and they're conducting this research. And each of one of those students is working with 1 to 2 to up to 10 undergraduate students. So you can see how that starts to fan out. And we've had a concerted effort to try to get more and more students involved, and it's starting to show up. So I think Southeast ACSM conference was a couple weeks ago, and there was 30 plus students there and faculty, which is great showing for UCF at a conference that was up in Greenville. And the same thing will be happening at the Student Scholar Symposium happening in a couple of weeks, where we have a lot of students that are presenting there. So some resources here. In the background of all the stuff we've talked about, these are the organizations. We encourage students as they work their way through our program, or even if you're not a student and you're interested in these topics, to become involved with these professional organizations. Obviously, they support professionals, but there's a big arm for each of these that are supporting students to make sure they get involved. Obviously, lower discounts for registration to become a member, and then opportunities to support students as they go to conferences and those sorts of things. Sarah, I don't know if you have more to add to this.
Yeah, so I just kind of leading into the end here. We really want Dr. Fukuda already, stressed the importance of student mentoring and kind of the numbers in each of our programs. But we are, very proud that we are able to, keep some students throughout the lifespan. We have a PhD student who's starting with me in the fall that has actually been with me for many years now, that was completed her undergrad internship with me. And so I don't necessarily know what that says about me, but we are grateful that students they want to stay. And I think that that really does show in, the mentoring and the variety of expertise of the faculty. That's why we can give you such a wide range of options, is because we have that range of faculty here. So if you are more interested, other than the organizations that we put up, even though we put our emails up, but I also put just our website, because you can go on and see all of the faculty that teach in our program and their research and teaching interests. And you might find something that you connect with, and you can reach out to that faculty member and kind of pick their brain and see what they're working on right now. And so I always encourage students to do that, because there are more specific things that we haven't mentioned today. But on that note, we'll just kind of open it up for questions. You can type in the chat, or if you want to unmute, you're welcome to do that, and we will take your questions.
Yeah,
And
I
does
have
that
a
mean you
quick
have a question?
question.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Hypothetically, I'm an undergraduate student who's really interested in UCF's kinesiology program. Do you have any recommendations on internships or experiences that could help me best be prepared or stand out if I was interested in a master's or PhD program with UCF? Thank you.
Yeah, so you asked about internships or other opportunities that would help prepare you for like a graduate school. We don't, necessarily require any like prerequisite work or experience other than our master's program. You do have to have 8 hours of anatomy and physiology, regardless of your undergraduate degree. And that is because we're not covering that. We go straight into exercise physiology. So we want to make sure that you're comfortable with kind of that basic A&P knowledge. However, similar to, if you're going to physical therapy or, physician assistant or OT school, it's always helpful to understand kind of your why. And maybe we should have talked about that a little bit more. But in our master's program, students have to complete a video essay. And so you're asked a variety of questions. And, one of the questions can be, why do you want to start this master's program? And so particularly with clinical exercise physiology, we are looking for students who know they want to work with that population, because it's a very specific population, and it takes, a certain type of individual that is interested in that. So if you're unsure, like I mentioned before, reach out to the faculty, see if you can come and observe in the research labs, or reach out to fitness centers and see if you can observe. A lot of places offer internships that are not a part of an undergrad program, but that's a little bit more difficult. But again, the kinesiology faculty are always here. The biggest thing is, again, to kind of have that base knowledge of why do you want to go into this field, and what type of people do you want to work with? We are essentially a customer service industry, right? We are serving customers, which are our clients, and or patients and or athletes. And so we're looking for the student who understands that and wants to, you know, the cliche answer to why do you want to do this is like, because I want to help people. But that's true. We were looking for students who know that they want to be in that service. Dr. Fukuda, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I put a link in the chat for our
Oh, great.
college's research study participation website. It lists a lot of our ongoing studies. Obviously, that's just a good way to see what's going on.
Mhm.
And it's not just a plug for me to try to get more research participants. I truly believe it's like the best way to understand what the options are. And, some of our best students came through have just like when they were undergrad, just volunteered for every study. So I have a
Mhm.
master's student who's finishing a thesis right now who actually got into the PhD program at East Carolina University recently, which is like a great, very well-known program. And he just volunteered for every study that we had in our lab. We just couldn't, and then at that point, we couldn't get rid of him, I guess. So he was just here all the time. And I think that's really where people start to, for me, the first time I took physics, I didn't get it, right? I didn't understand. But then once I sat down and I started to go through biomechanics and then went back and started thinking about physics, all of a sudden it clicked for me. Like it made sense to me when I could think about uh, thermodynamics, thinking about calories and what I eat, and how my body uses those things. It made more sense to me, or how I lifted weights with levers and that sort of thing. So all that stuff makes more sense if you're able to apply it in such a way. Plus, you start to find the people, not just the people you want to work with, like populations, but also the kinds of people you want to be around. So we really encourage people that if you're going to be in our discipline, you're going to need to be hands-on, and the best way to do it is to get involved and, see these things firsthand.
Anyone else?
I might give one more example of one of our students that went through undergrad, actually all the way through her PhD. So as an undergrad student, she got involved with sports science over in athletics. So she stayed on and she did her thesis working with the soccer team. And then actually her PhD as well. And each point it was like one was just observing, and then there were some interventions and trying to come up with their own ways to assess muscle strength to try to avoid injury specifically. And then she graduated with her PhD. She worked for the Utah Royal for a while, but then she's been working for Inter Miami. So she'll post regularly pictures of her with Messi on her Instagram, and their celebration after they won more recently. So kind of a cool sort of thing that this is what she decided what she wanted to do, and she found sort of the pathway to go through and do that. We have students who are also working at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Um, some of them working with military populations and all that sort of thing. Those are like examples from the PhD program, but that pathway is there. And as Dr. Freddie mentioned, there's points at each step along the way where we could stop and sort of have a full-time career related to that. Well, it looks like we're about out of time. We appreciate everyone hanging out with us for a little bit. And if you have questions, feel free to follow up with our contact information.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Freddie and Dr. Fukuda, for such an awesome presentation for today's Pre-Health Thursday. It has been awesome to hear about the journeys and paths that led you to where you guys are today. And it's been very inspiring, the contributions you made to the field and just sharing what UCF's kinesiology program is about. So we really appreciate you coming and talking with us today. And for students, again, if you have any questions for them, feel free to reach out to them. They are both super awesome and very nice people. And if you have any questions for AAP, please feel free to reach out to us. And in the chat, there is an end of the event survey. If you guys could please fill that out. But again, thank you so much for coming to present for us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.